Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin, because I do be reading. And today we're talking about all of the books that I read in September. You know, I continue to have a very mediocre reading year. I did read some like decent books and books that I enjoyed this month, but it's been a mixed bag. I also didn't read all that much. I only read 5 books this month. So here's hoping that October treats me better than, you know, the rest of this year has been. So at the beginning of this month, I started off with The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin, which is the second and final book in the Great Cities duology. The first book being The City We Became. You know what? I've been having a hard time finishing series over the last few years, honestly. And I, you know what, this kept staring at me from my bookshelves, and I was like, you know what, the time is now. The time is now. I'm finally going to finish this. This came out like, I want to say like nearly a year ago now. And I think I was like scared of picking this up, worried that it wasn't going to be as good as the first book. And to be fair, it isn't as good as I thought the first book was, but I still really enjoyed this one. I gave this one a 4.25 stars. If you're not familiar with this series, we basically are in a world like ours. When cities kind of reach their, let's call it cultural peak, they go through a birthing process and get assigned like an avatar, someone in the city, from the city, who lives in the city, that kind of represents the city, to help it through the birthing process and just kind of be the avatar of that city. And so at the beginning of the first book, New York City is going through that birthing process. But because New York has like multiple boroughs and a lot of like distinct neighborhoods with their own kind of feel and vibe, there ends up being multiple avatars. And also the birthing process doesn't go as planned, because we have this like kind of alien city that's coming and trying to destroy everything. And it's pretty common for this alien city to, they've been like an enemy, I guess you could say, in the background for all of these other cities as well, but it's gotten worse and stronger. So you have this kind of alien city that is trying to take over New York, and basically throughout this series they're trying to stop this city and basically fight for, I don't know, the world. It gets a little bit multiversal, it gets a little bit cosmic, a little like high concept. And I really enjoyed that. The metaphors and allegories for gentrification and racism and just like everything else that's been going on in our world and our history is very overt. And I think if you're someone that tends to like more subtle discussions of those things, maybe you won't like this. But I think N.K. Jemisin is just like so strong in her craft that even though some of these things are very like apparent and very in your face, like it's still done with nuance. And I really enjoyed this series. Y'all know I love N.K. Jemisin. One thing I will say about this book in particular is that there's a fight scene, like a big battle, if you will, at the end of this book that is almost entirely just like conceptual. And the way she wrote it, like I'm just so impressed by her technical skills and the way that she was able to like write this fight scene. I was like, whoa, this is the wildest, like truly most unique like fight scene that I've ever read in a book or even seen in anything. And truly, she's a genius. She is. Like I said, I didn't love this as much as the first book. It just felt a little bit like rushed to me. And I was reading, I think, the acknowledgments at the end or the author's note, and I think this was meant to be a trilogy, but then the pandemic happened, and like everything that was happening in the world just kind of impacted the way that this series came to be, which was totally understandable to me. But I still enjoyed it. I still love this series, and I highly recommend it. Then I picked up Red Rising by Pierce Brown, which I'm positive that I'm going to be putting up the reading vlog for that book before I post this September wrap up, so you can hear all of my thoughts on that book in that video. I will try not to rehash everything in this video, but I did not like this book, okay? It's somewhere between like a 1.5 and a 2 star. It is a dystopian sci-fi space story following our main character Darrow, who is a teen boy. He is a red. We are in a world where there is a caste system based off of colors, where reds are at the bottom and golds are at the top. Our main character is a red. He and his fellow reds kind of live underground-ish, I think, on Mars. And they are basically like mining. They're doing mining and also like terraforming Mars to make it habitable for people to come live. But it turns out that that was all a lie. And Mars has been inhabited this whole time. And all of these things, there's something that happens that catalysts Darrow to join the rebellion group called the Sons of Ares. And then he ends up getting made over to be a gold, basically, and sent to go infiltrate and kind of rise amongst the ranks of the golds to take them down from the inside, I guess. I've talked at length about my thoughts about this book on that video, and I also posted a TikTok if you want to go see me talk about my thoughts on that book. But basically, I think it is poorly constructed. I don't understand why it's supposed to be a dystopian. I have many questions about how we got to this point in time. I have questions about like what exactly this book is trying to do in terms of commentary, which I would expect out of a dystopian. And it just feels so cis hetero man. It's also loosely based on the Roman Empire, which if you've been hearing about all of that on TikTok and how apparently white men think about the Roman Empire a lot, it's yeah. Anyways, I didn't like it, and I didn't like it. So, on the trend of attempting to finish off some series, I was inspired by the fact that I actually finished up The World We Make. I decided that I was going to finally finish up the Folk of the Air trilogy. And I read the final book in that series, which is The Queen of Nothing. This is by Holly Black. This is a very, very popular YA fantasy trilogy about fae. We are following Jude, who is a human that lives in the fae world, and things happen. I'm losing steam, okay? I just filmed this like giant fall recommendation video, and I'm losing a little bit of steam on describing books right now. But basically, this is the third book in a series, and how I felt about it is that this was a really weird installment. I will say this is, I think, the weakest book in the series. I mean, I liked it. Like, I ate it up. But also, like, nothing really happens in this book, and I don't think it's, like, a well-done conclusion to the trilogy. But overall, I find myself surprisingly enjoying this trilogy as a whole. It's a lot more like politics heavy than I was anticipating, which is great because I love a politics heavy book. And I will say this is probably one of the very few enemies to lovers that I enjoyed and think was done mostly right. I will say the transition from enemies to lovers could have used a little bit more work, but yeah, you know, I bought into it. It's a good time. I like these characters and it's fun. Yeah. Oh, and I think I'd probably give this like a 3-star. Then I picked up Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. This is her sophomore novel, her first being The Hacienda, which I have not read, but I really enjoyed this one. I think this is getting a little bit mismarketed, or maybe people are just like expecting certain things out of this book that it's not. And I will say I would go into this book expecting a historical romance with a speculative element rather than the speculative / horror piece being at the forefront of the story. So we're following a dual POV. We're following Nena and Nestor. They grew up being childhood friends. Nena's father owns like this big ranch, and Nestor and his family are vaqueros, so basically they like work the land. So Nena's father is their boss, but they grew up together and they love each other. And something happens at the start of this story that kind of causes them to lose contact with each other. Basically, Nena is attacked by something, and Nestor believes that she's dead, and he runs away thinking that, you know, he couldn't save her, it's his fault. So 9 years later, they are reconnecting. Nena believes he just like left her, and he's like shocked to see that she's alive because he's been thinking she's been dead this whole time. And they are reconnecting because she is joining her father and some other men from different ranches and vaqueros to kind of the front lines because the U.S. is invading Mexico. This is taking place in the background of the Mexican-American War in the 1840s rather. And she is kind of training under his grandmother, actually, Nestor's grandmother, to like be like a healer. And so she is brought along to be a healer, but there's just, in the kerfuffle of fighting, they end up getting separated, and she's alone with Nestor, and she has to return home because there are the U.S. is using vampires, or these vampire-like creatures, to fight against Mexico, basically. And so she's like the only one who kind of understands what's going on, so she's like rushing back home, and he's accompanying her, and on the way they're dealing with vampires and also U.S. Army and all of these things, all while they're reconnecting and dealing with their traumas and falling in love with each other again. Like I said, definitely more heavy on the romance than it is on the like supernatural aspects of this book, but I really enjoyed it. I also like enjoyed the like kind of like class dynamic conversations that were going on because, like I said, Nena is the daughter of like a rich like rancher, and Nestor and his family are the people who work for her father. So it's a good time. I enjoyed it. Definitely going to be checking out The Hacienda from Isabel Cañas and her other works. The final book that I picked up was Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was one of my most anticipated books of this year. I really enjoyed Elizabeth Acevedo's YA books, the two that I read. And I was so excited to see that she was writing her adult debut, and that it was like magical realism and family sagas and multi-generation, and it was just like the perfect book for me. Unfortunately, this didn't like super work out for me. I would still give this one somewhere between like a 3.5 and a 3.75 stars. This undoubtedly has Elizabeth Acevedo's like beautiful lyrical writing that I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed how it tackled like generational curses and intergenerational like relationships. Basically, we're following the women of the Marte family. We have Flor, who has the ability to kind of sense when people are going to die. We have the eldest, Matilde, who is described as not having an ability, but I don't think that's true based off of this book, but I'll keep that spoiler free. We have Pastora, who has like this innate sense to know the truth of things. She can like tell when people are lying and just kind of know immediately what someone needs when looking at them. And then the youngest sister, Camila, who has like the ability with like herbs and is able to make the perfect brew for what you need. And we're also following Ona, who is Flor's daughter. She has a magical pussy. And she's also kind of like our main narrator. Like, the way that this is styled is that she's like interviewing the different women and also like interjecting her own story. And then we also have Yadi, who is Pastora's daughter, and she has like this innate ability with limes. It's kind of hard to describe. And this is multi-POV, multi-timeline, and some of these timelines and also POVs are like intersecting with each other. So I think if you're someone that really needs more straightforward storytelling, you might have a hard time with this. But I personally really enjoyed that aspect. I heard that Elizabeth Acevedo listened to jazz while writing this music. So the style of jazz and the different instruments playing off of each other and riffing off of each other and interjecting each other is what really inspired like kind of like the cadence of the storytelling of this book, which I really liked, especially as someone who was a trumpet player and was in jazz band. I really felt the rhythm of this book. And I really enjoyed the audiobook as well. I think you might enjoy it a little bit more there, or at least doing like a hybrid situation, because being able to reference the family chart at the beginning was really helpful. Basically, at the start of this book, Flor decides that she wants to have a living wake. Her family members are thinking that maybe she like senses her own death coming, but she is being very like hush hush about it, and is just letting people know that she wants to have a living wake, and that she wants to be celebrated. So we are leading up to this wake in this story, and then we're kind of bouncing between timelines. We're learning about these different women and their lives and their relationships to one another, and their relationships to the Dominican Republic, and then being immigrants, and their new relationship with New York City, and just like all of that stuff, and like sisterhood and motherhood. And there were parts of this that like really deeply resonated with me, but I just like in general felt like I wanted more. Like I really wanted more from the story. It almost felt a little, I don't know, aimless to me. Like I can tell what she was trying to do, and I can tell what I was supposed to glean out of this book, particularly like breaking generational curses, and like the younger generation pushing forward and just doing things that were considered taboo before. But I don't know. It just felt like something was missing. So unfortunately, it was not a 5-star, even though I was hoping it to be, even though I went into it expecting that it would be, but it was not. And I just feel like this year, I've just been reading books that I would anticipate being like the book for me, and they've just not been hitting. Like for example, Black Cake by Charlene Wilkerson. Like I thought that was going to be a 5-star, because it's like multi-generational, like family saga type story. It didn't quite hit. I really thought the Bandit Queens was going to hit for me, and it didn't. I don't know. I've just been having a very hard time. And to be fair, I have been picking up books that I feel like I know are not going to be 5-star reads, but sometimes like you just need a 3-star read, or you just want to try something new. But even the books that I'm picking up thinking like I'm really going to like this have just not been hitting. So it's been a bit of a bummer reading year for me, but we still have 4 more months left of this year, and I hope that it's a banger, that we go off with a bang, because as of right now, if I were to make a favorites of 2023 video, it would have 2 books, and then the rest would be like honorable mentions, I guess. So put out good energy for me, guys, and I'll see y'all in the next video.